Hello, I'm Simon Le Bon, and you are listening to the Pantheon Network.
Hey, I'm Nick DiMatteo, and welcome to Season 6, Episode 6 of Music is Not a Genre, MxG. I should bring my hands in front of the microphone if I'm going to do these gestures for you to see them, or maybe above my, how about above my head, MxG. There you go. You don't need to see my face so much, which, by the way, if you are just listening, thank you. If you're watching, you already know, and if not, go to youtube.com/@musicisnotagenre. You get to see all of these episodes on video. Getting right into the topic, as usual, here for Season 6, and that is Depeche Mode and New Order, the Flipside twins of New Wave. So I debated on whether or not to do these bands separately, and then I said no. But first of all, let me get into why these two bands at all. Well, they're legendary. They've influenced a ton of bands. I was a DJ for a while, and they played a big part in our DJ sets, my partner and I. Their production values have influenced so many bands and genres, throughout subsequently. Their mix of techno music, of electronic music with rock has always been something that has compelled me. If you remember back on episode 4, which I didn't record the exact same day as episode 6. No. I was talking about an electro power pop band. All of that stuff really comes from bands like Depeche Mode and New Order, who in some way incorporated both organic and electronic instruments. And so that's the idea of combining genres to create something new, whether it's your own sound or a completely new genre, has always compelled me. There was a friend of mine in high school, the first time I ever remember somebody using kind of a mix of genre names. She described a flock of seagulls as techno pop rock. And I thought, wow, I agree with that. It's compelling, and couldn't completely understand why at the time. And I think that helped kind of spur my interest in combinations of genres and how genre lines blur and all of that. And I think the same could be said for Depeche Mode and New Order. Now, why together? Why didn't I split them up when they both deserve multiple episodes, per band? Because they're often lumped together. They're often mentioned together, often pitted against each other. They're compared and contrasted. They came up around the same time, even though they started in different ways. They started around the same time too, even in the mid-late 70s. They ended up in places that are similar in terms of their combination of, again, rock music, dance rock music is what a lot of people would call it, but new wave, techno, house, whatever, both British bands. Even to this day, there are forums where people are comparing and contrasting Depeche Mode and New Order and debating on who was better and which albums were great and who was more influential and all of that stuff, which are questions I'm going to ask you later too. They've both been huge influences on all of techno and electronic music. The reason I said Flipside twins, right? And I'm taking a drink of seltzer here. Not the greatest choice of beverage when you're doing audio and you're talking, but I'm taking that chance because I'm a rebel, all right? Listen to me drink. Gulp. And this is throughout history, bands and artists have been pitted against each other. If you think of the Beatles and the Stones, I'm sure there was somebody, Frank Sinatra was pitted against, or Elvis. But even before then, Billy Joel and Elton John, Prince and Michael Jackson, Nirvana and Pearl Jam, Tupac and Biggie, The Strokes and the White Stripes, Britney and Christina, Cardi B and Nicki Minaj. I mean, it goes on and on to this day where it's often false. And I did an episode of that way back on rivalries and how they are usually bogus. They're usually not between the actual artists. Sometimes they are. But like in a perfect example of like the Beatles and the Stones, they were friends, like the only people who pitted them against each other were like critics and some fans, and that's it. But the same has happened with Depeche Mode, and that's why I kind of said that, Flipside twins. And so how I'm doing this episode, it's kind of a usual thing. I'm going to do a history of each band separately, starting with New Order because they started slightly before Depeche Mode. And then I'm going to do a discography, but doing it together as each album came out from each band. Then I'm going to get into the conclusions, the featured song, bonus episode, which this week the bonus episode is on Vince Clarke. and how prolific he's been and how influential he himself has been. And I'll talk more about that a little bit later. But to see the whole thing, patreon.com/musicisnotagenre is where you're going to get the bonus episode for every single main episode of Music Is Not a Genre. And then, of course, featured song, but special here. There are going to be 2 featured songs. There are 2 bands, and even though the electro, power pop, or whatever you want to call it, dance rock of What I've Done incorporates elements of both bands, these 2 songs illustrate the sort of yin and yang and hot and cold and whatever you want to call it, techno and house sides of Depeche Mode and New Order. And for the first time ever, one of the featured songs is going to be smack in the middle of the episode, because now that we're taking breaks, instead of going straight to a commercial, I'm going to go straight to that song, and then to the commercial, and then to the second half, and then to another song. That's how that's going to go. So now you know what to expect. History. Let's start. Like when I talked about Beck and how Beck and I have converged and diverged and have ended up at times in the same place. Although we started from different places, we ended up incorporating a lot of similar influences and elements. The same can be said of New Order and I was going to say Joy Division. New Order and Depeche Mode, in that they ended up in similar places even though they started from different emphases, let's say. So New Order, of course, sprung from the ashes of Joy Division, which started in 1976. I did a season 1 episode on New Order coming from Joy Division. They were pure post-punk with some electro that would, eventually morph more heavily in the electro direction once Ian Curtis died, and they reformed and became New Order in 2001. In 1981. You have Bernard Sumner, who is the primary vocalist. He does guitars, he keys. Peter Hook, who was the bass player for them for the longest time. They were both in Joy Division as well. He stayed until 2007. Stephen Morris, also from the original band, does drums and keys. And then Jillian Gilbert, who was brought on after the death of Ian Curtis and who has been with them off and on ever since. Just like the Wombats, in the sense that every single member played their instrument, but also played keys, which I think was interesting. It's more common than you might think. New Order transitioned from mostly kind of dark post-punk to a darker, lighter, and brighter electro house. Right on the first 2 albums, you can hear that transition. It was kind of like getting over the depression of a big death, as well as coming out of the shadow that he cast and that Joy Division cast stylistically. And that, of course, emerged biggest with their first early hit, Blue Monday, in 1983, followed by Bizarre Love Triangle in 1986, which is where I came into New Order, and we'll talk about that in the discography. And then right 1-2 punch, True Faith in 1987, which is, I think, I even like even more. Their kind of first run would peter out with Technique in 1989, the album. And then they come back big in 1993 with the album Republic and their song Regret. Again, we'll go over a lot of this in the discography. I jumped back on to New Order in 93 and have stayed with them for the duration, as off and on as they've been. They were, of course, dance club staples throughout the 1980s and beyond. After that 93 album, they took a hiatus until 2001's Get Ready. You'll see those 2 albums on my diorama there for people who aren't watching. I've got 3 of each album. I've 3 albums from each band on my little display here. And that album to me reinvigorated them, and it's one of my favorites. I'll talk about it later. 2005 was the first album without Peter Hook and Jillian Gilbert, but with Phil Cunningham. And another hiatus after that. Boy, the hiatus this is. And then the next proper album really didn't come out until 2015, so like 10-year break there. And then that saw the return of Jillian Gilbert as well. New Order's always been, I think, more house, and Depeche Mode more techno, where house kind of has that sort of like constant state of being feeling. When you think kind of a rave where you're just there and you're experiencing the motion and the beat and the overall feel and sound. And techno has more variation within it, more tension and release. It has a different purpose to it. It has more kind of spark energy and things like when you think of, even newer DJs and, dubstep and things like that, that comes more from the techno end than the house end. And, ambient comes more from house than from techno, which leads me to Depeche Mode. Depeche Mode's germs started the year after Joy Division in 1977 by Vince Clarke and Andy Fletcher with a band they named No Romance in China. And Andy Fletcher, who, yes, we know recently died, and right before their Depeche Mode's new album came out. In 1980, they regrouped as the band Composition of Sound, which Dave Gahan has often, made fun of that name, but I think it's kind of neat. Martin Gore came on that year, and then Dave Gahan came on shortly after, and they renamed themselves Depeche Mode. Was it after a French magazine or something? I don't know, whatever. Their first full album in 1981 was Speak and Spell, and was heavily Vince Clarke. And again, bonus episode on Vince Clarke, and you'll see why that's significant. You'd hear elements of what Vince Clarke would go on to create after he left Depeche Mode. Early 80s, again, just like New Order, transitional regarding their sound. They went from this kind of really bright electro pop to a much darker sound, slowly but surely over the first the 3 albums, let's say, that they'd be known for that darker sound. Later on, Alan Wilder came on board and in the mid 80s, I believe, or early 80s, and stayed until the mid 1990s. They started to veer more towards political and social lyrics in the 80s, as opposed to New Order's mostly interpersonal lyrics. I don't know how much, politics New Order's ever gotten into. The true breakout year for Depeche Mode, just like New Order, was 1983. If you don't count Just Can't Get Enough, because it's such a different style. But it counts in a way, of course. It's a great song, and we do it live, and I love singing it. And that's because Construction Time again had the hit Everything Counts in large amounts. Same year as Blue Monday, like I said. But their U.S. breakout was in 84 with the song People Are People, and that's the first time I remember hearing them. From Some Great Reward. It was on a title track U.S. compilation, though, before then, the U.S. release. Side note, and I think this is a comment more on the 1980s and styles and the fact that gender fluidity and gender bending and ambiguity, let's say, has been around longer than we realize. When I was young, I always thought that Depeche Mode, that they were all gay. And they have a huge gay following, as do a lot of Vince Clarke's subsequent bands. And it turns out I didn't learn until very recently that none of them are. In fact, in this whole world of music, I think only Andy Bell himself is gay. But again, huge following, more for Depeche Mode than New Order, but really for both. And it just shows that use of like kind of post-glam with makeup, but even things that Prince was doing, and just the gender bending was I think an important part of what Depeche Mode was doing and the image that they would show for years. 83, 84 would start a run from then that continued through to 1993 Songs of Faith and Devotion, which was the same year as the final chart breath of New Order, 1993 with Republic, and the same year I came back into Depeche Mode and never left. After they lost Alan Wilder in 87, they kind of started a little bit of a slide, but as far as artistically, they would kind of come up and down and have done throughout these years, including this year's recent album, Memento Mori, which was the first album without the late Andy Fletcher. So that's a quick history of those bands. Let's get into the discographies. Now listen, New Order has 10 proper albums and Depeche Mode 15. I'm not going into super detail on any of them because I don't want this episode to be freaking long. It will be long, but not freaking long. I will jump between the two, as I said, based on when the albums came out. I'm not going to focus on solo efforts like Dave Gahan's 2007 album, or offshoots of bands like when Bernard Sumner has partnered with Johnny Marr to create Electronic, the band, or Vince Clarke and Martin Gore getting back together for VCMG. Just mention those, look them up, fine. That's not what we're talking about here. So let's get into it right away. The first of these bands to release an album was Depeche Mode, and it was Speak and Spell in October 1981. Again, Vince Clarke Fest, pure synth pop with like barely a hint of darkness. Barely. Hardly any. Just Can't Get Enough was the big hit. Like I said, we do this live. It goes over well. In November 81, Movement from New Order came out. It was their statement of we're continuing on despite Ian Curtis's death. You can hear glimpses of the future, but it still sounds a whole hell of a lot like what you would imagine Joy Division would have done had Ian Curtis survived. Still very dark, very little electro. It's very just post-punk, ambient post-punk, dark. Dreams Never End, great song. Wasn't a well-received album, but so what? A Broken Frame was the next Depeche Mode album in 1982, which was a cool starting the transition into darker sounds. Still a lot of brightness there. It's a super transitional album, and I love it for that. Doesn't make it the strongest album, but I love it. Leave in Silence is a song I like from that. Power, Corruption, and Lies from May 1983 is New Order's really kind of coming out album, and I have looked up rankings of the albums of both Depeche Mode and New Order. And I usually disagree with most rankings because they tend to discount later works in a way that's very subjective and other reasons. But one thing that I think all rankings for New Order agreed on was that Power, Corruption, and Lies was their best album. And I would put it in top 3, for sure. Age of Consent, the song, immediately breaks them out of that darkness and starts to establish that new sound. It still has that great toe in post-punk, but it's brighter and dancier. Leave Me Alone is their new sound, and it's to me how Bernard Sumner's voice would sound for years and years, basically. We'll talk about his voice later. Blue Monday was technically not on this album, but came out around the same time, and it still stands as the best-selling 12-inch single of all time. It was huge in our DJ set, even though we were DJing a couple of years after it came out. So that was in, like I said, May 83. In August 83, Depeche Mode put out Construction Time again, even darker than A Broken Frame, but still not quite as assured and as dark as they would get. It's not quite their breakout yet, the way Power, Corruption, and Lies was New Order's breakout. Dave Gahan still hadn't found his voice, but he was getting closer. Everything Counts is a perfect example of them starting to find their sound, and it's an awesome song. That production sound, like Blue Monday, is iconic and has influenced so many other songs and artists throughout the decades. They followed it up in 1984, Depeche Mode, with Some Great Reward, which to me was their first This Is Us as Depeche Mode album, where they really sounded like the Depeche Mode that we know. It was also their breakout in the United States with People Are People, Master and Servant, Blasphemous Rumors. There are 2 other songs in this album that were very important to me that I like. Somebody, which is a very soft song that I feel is the companion to New Order's Every Little Counts, which is coming up soon. And I had them on a mix at some point, a cassette mix. It's just this kind of little, kind of dark, slightly melancholy love song, Somebody. And If You Want To is a great dark techno song. And it was also on a mix. So 2 songs that aren't usually talked about from that album you should check out. Next year, New Order released Lowlife in 85. It's the first album to me where they are 100% now New Order. Yes, Power, Corruption, and Lies killed, and it was their breakout album, but they still had some elements of that Joy Division sound, and this was like, now we're New Order, now we know what that means. It's electro dance rock, whatever you want to call it. The songs, Love Vigilantes, frick, man. And I will say this about Lowlife, and it was a surprise to me. It may be my favorite album listening experience by New Order. It's definitely in the top 3. For me, I enjoy it even more than Power, Corruption, and Lies. They're fully self-assured. I love the production. Sooner Than You Think, another song that I like at all. But also, to me, I've always wondered this, and I don't know how you feel about it. There's no comparison between Dave Gahan and Bernard Sumner's voices. They sing differently. So they're apples and oranges. And at the same time, what they're doing, I feel like that's a perfect example of how the different types of electronic music function, because there's certain types of music where the booming voice and the rounded tone and let's say well-crafted notes are important in that dance music, and others where hanging back and being kind of casual and off the cuff is more important. And Bernard Sumner has spent most of his career singing in a very casual, off-the-cuff way, and I'll just put it that way. Now, I'm going to mention this because I own it. Catching Up with Depeche Mode in 1985, here it is on the diorama, was important because it marked the end of their first phase, that transitional phase into who they became, an illustration of their evolution, and it was a great collection to start with if you didn't know them before then, which is one of the reasons I got it, although I got it subsequent. And yes, did want to explore their work prior to when I knew them, and that's one of the reasons I got it. Like I said, followed that up in March of 86 with Black Celebration, which again, just like the title, deeper into darkness, deeper into industrial. They are fully Depeche Mode on this. The songs A Question of Lust, A Question of Time, and Stripped stand out to me. And then you have September 1986, shortly after, New Order's Brotherhood, which was their true U.S. breakthrough. Blue Monday was a big hit, but really the biggest hit for them in the U.S., the breakout hit was Bizarre Love Triangle, and that's where I jumped in. And that was a huge, huge 12-inch for us in our DJ sets. And this is the album that also included Every Little Counts. I did an acoustic cover of that, which you can find at youtube.com/appmusic is not a genre. And it's just one of my personal favorites. I like how, again, it's sort of this off the cuff, like love song, Brighter Than Somebody by Depeche Mode, but still has a little melancholy in it. And then the way it ends is just epic and beautiful. And you can hear it influencing, like The Verve and Oasis and other British bands that came after that. Substance was released by them in August 1987. It's not a proper album, but it's significant because it's just like Catching Up with Depeche Mode in the sense of it compiled some singles and things, but also because it marks the release of the song True Faith, which to me is the last of their classic era singles. And I personally like it better than Bizarre Love Triangle and Blue Monday. I don't know why. I know it was part of our mix and our set, and I have that 12-inch as well, but I'm going to mark that as saying I actually like it better, right? I'm going to do two more albums, then we're taking a break. Music for the Masses in September 1987, so the month after Substance came out. That's the Depeche Mode album, super freaking solid and consistent. I think this is my favorite early album of theirs, Music for the Masses. I love the production on this one. Never Let Me Down Again, Strange Love, and Little 15 are my favorites from the album. Which brings me to the last release from these bands in the 1980s, which was 1989's Technique. It's the danciest of all of their early albums. I like the production on this too. I don't think it's as dancey as some critics said it was at the time. What I mean is I don't think it's that much more dancey than any of their previous releases from the couple years before then. But I believe Peter Hook described it as their Ibiza record or whatever it is. That's fine. Whatever. My favorites from this, I didn't absorb this then. I was past New Order at the time and then came back in, like I said, in 93, so I missed it. But listening to it recently, I like All the Way. Sounds like a Just Like Heaven song. Love Less, Guilty Partner, and Dream Attack. And with that, something fancy and new. We're going to take a break and jump right into one of my featured songs. And that featured song is, you know what? I'm not 100% sure which one it is. It's either going to be All Kinds of Right, the Highway 28 song, or it's going to be Polymath. And you can see the difference in the two bands in these two songs. You have to stay tuned for the next few seconds to find out which one it is. And then what I'm going to do is then talk about those featured songs as I usually do near the end of the episode. So back in whatever that doorknob Chuck Woolery used to say, 2 and 2, but it's more like 4. See ya.
Temperament is such that nothing ever gets past me. world's turning. I live in fear of you. What's a polymath to do? What's a polymath to do? What's a polymath to do? And your eyes got stuck closed. You think you're the only one who knows. You stuck to the things that drag you down. Good luck ever having someone around. You blinked and your eyes got stuck closed. You think you're the only one who knows. You stuck to the things that drag you down. Good luck ever having someone around. Stuck closed. What's a polymath to do? You think you're the only one who knows. What's a polymath to do? What's a polymath to do?
Hey, so I was going to do the usual and just list all of the links that I'd love for you to check out, but I realized that everything you need to know and everywhere you need to go is at nickdimattio.com. That really is the hub. I list all the links in every episode just in case, but nickdimattio.com is where I put everything that I do. If you want to know more about this podcast, whether it's the audio version or the YouTube version at youtube.com/@musicisnotagenre or wherever else the podcast shows up, or if you want to support the podcast at patreon.com/musicisnotagenre, just go to nickdimattio.com. It's all there. If you want to check out my full discography of original music and covers for my band REC, REC, and beyond, it's at nickdimattio.com, including all the streaming and social links for wherever you listen to music and wherever you check out your soch. My acting clips are there. My voiceover clips are there. Graphic design, my blog, and most especially, it's the best place to contact me. If you go to nickdimattio.com/contact or just hit the contact is on every single page. You can send me a note, say hello, ask me any questions you'd like. You get a newsletter a few times a month, and if you have a project of your own and need work done for it, whether it's audio editing or music or voiceover or graphic design, or if you have an event and you need live music, go to nickdimattio.com, contact me, say hello, let me know what you need. I'd love to hear from you. Thanks for listening. Let's get back to the show. Hello, we are back after that ad, but how'd you like the song? Neat, huh? I don't know which one it was. Like I said, I haven't decided yet, but I'll make a quick mention. And then again, like I said, I'll explain them more later on. If it was Polymath, that's my Depeche Mode homage. Not that I meant it that way, but you could see the influence or hear it. If it was All Kinds of Right, the Highway 28 song, that's in the New Order direction. I believe you can hear the influence in that too. And I'll get into more detail of that later on. Right now, let's get back to the discography, starting in 1990. With a hugely influential and important album, Depeche Mode's Violator, which is really, despite all of their 80s success and their two phases or whatever you want to call it, 1981's Just Can't Get Enough and the darker stuff after it and the political stuff, 1990's Violator is what established them as megastars forever, along with Songs of Faith and Devotion. But those two just double whammies as freaking was like, oh, Depeche Mode has upped the game and will not quit, in the way U2 did with Joshua Tree or Achtung Baby and stuff like that in a similar era. This is a very extremely amazingly solid album. It's less 1980s. It's more downbeat. It's really looking forward in ways that other albums of 1990 were not looking forward. Some of the songs I really like: Sweetest Perfection, Personal Jesus, Enjoy the Silence, which we do live. Our drummer sings it. I do the keyboards and the high harmonies. And Policy of Truth I always freaking liked. I always love that little keyboard slide, the portamento where it goes da na 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 na. Just little things like that always made an impact on me, and it's probably Andy Fletcher, you know. So that brings me to when a band has a successful album that's more successful than they expected or whatever, and their touring goes well, it tends to delay the release of the next album because they're working on, you know, stuff for that album and the touring and all that stuff and the promo. So 3 years would pass before any of these bands released anything, and that was 1993, March of 93, Songs of Faith and Devotion, which is where I really came back to Depeche Mode in a bigger way than I even was into them in the 80s. I didn't expect them to hit that big in 93, considering everything else that was going on in the music world, and it absolutely kills. It's not here on this diorama because I have it on cassette, and I didn't go into my cassette bag, which I guess I should have. I also didn't go into my vinyl collection, which I should have for New Order, but whatever. You can imagine pictures of them. And so I have Songs of Faith and Devotion on cassette. And I devoured this album, devoured it. Hugely influential to me. You can absolutely hear the influence in that song Polymath, which I guess would be the song. I don't know. I still don't know which one I'm doing first or second. You know already because I've already edited all this. I think this album, more than any other album from either band on this list, is the one that was the most influential to me. It's darker, which if you didn't think that was possible, it is. It was harder. It's probably my favorite all-time Depeche Mode album, and absolutely, certainly top 3. It's also the end of their classic era, the end of their first run. Songs I love from this: I Feel You, Walking in My Shoes, Condemnation, Mercy in You, In Your Room, Get Right With Me, and One Caress, although the whole album is great. A couple months later, May 93, New Order would release Republic, which I do have back here. You can see it, that kind of dichotomized cover. What a great year for 1980s techno bands coming back. 93 was. Republic was an album. Again, I did not expect New Order to be relevant or make anything significant after the 80s, and they proved me and everyone else wrong. The song Regret, I think, actually might be my favorite New Order song, and that's probably very controversial considering what they released in the 80s. But for me, for whatever reason, when I hear Regret, that's the song that makes me tingle. World is another great song. Spooky, Young Offender, and Liar. Super strong album. And I would say definitely top 5 for me, 4, maybe top 4 for New Order. And then a few years more would pass. And by the way, quick note, they went on hiatus after that for whatever reason and wouldn't release another album for several years, whereas New Depeche Mode would release an album 4 years after Songs of Faith and Devotion. It's called Ultra. It was their first album as a trio since 1982. The drug problems of Dave Gahan are well known. I don't really dwell on things like that. I'm thankful that he's doing well now and that he was continued to make great music and all of that stuff. I like the sounds they were incorporating on Ultra. They were trying to go in even a less like reverby direction and a little darker direction again. But I felt like the energy was a little low on this album. It reminds me a lot of their new album, actually, in terms of that level of energy and even the certain sounds they were using. But the songs I do like from this: Barrel of a Gun, The Love Thieves, It's No Good, and Jazz Thieves is fun. I just kind of like that. Which brings me to New Order's. No, sorry, not New Order's. Depeche Mode's next album, which was another 4 years after that, in May 2001, Exciter. which I have right here, that weird flower. I read the name and forgot it. You can look it up. I remember liking this a lot better than Ultra. I remember being very encouraged and thinking, oh, Ultra was like an echo of Songs of Faith and Devotion that was almost like a B-sides compilation, even though it wasn't. Whereas Exciter had more energy and was adding new things and going in new directions. It was softer, so they didn't keep trying to double down on the hardness, which might have put them in a rut. But their soft sounds and the way they produced the album was very, very clever and interesting. It's probably a top 3 Depeche Mode album for me, Exciter. Definitely top 5 at the very least. Songs I like from their Dream On, Shine, The Dead of Night, Comatose, and I Feel Loved. If you're looking back, next to Republic is the album with one famous photo by a famous photographer, I believe, August 2001, same year as Exciter. So again, this double whammy of these two bands creating strong albums in the same year that were in ways comebacks for them. The album Get Ready from New Order. This is 100% a top 3 New Order album for me. I remember when it was released, I like it even better than Republic, and I was like, wow, they still have it. And it was very encouraging. Tons of renewed energy. Better production, I think, than Republic. Even it's more of a nice healthy mix of electro and post-punk and new elements of things that were going on in the late 90s and early 2000s. I think this is the album where Bernard Sumner's singing started to actually get strong. In a way where I don't know what the difference is. He was pretty strong on Republic, but this is where I was like, oh, he's just easing into the voice he has, and he's working it really well, and it meshes best with the music, and it's great that Gillian Gilbert is more present vocally. I believe it's the opening track, Crystal, is one of their best songs ever. Regret and Blue Monday and Bizarre Love Triangle and True Faith and all that. I think Crystal's one of their best and ranks right up there. I know it's not as impactful because by then this kind of music had been around for a while, but objectively I think that's true. I also love 60 Miles an Hour, Turn My Way. Primitive Notion is freaking excellent. Slow Jam is also awesome. Rock the Shack is fun. And Someone Like You, I also like that. So then... And one of the last CDs I have here is New Order again in March 2005, Waiting for the Siren's Call. You can see it over there. I don't necessarily think it's as strong as Get Ready. Other critics might disagree, but I still think it's super strong and still in the same vein. And some of the songs and it made me feel like, oh, if they keep this going, they have a good like latter day career. Some of the songs I like, Who's Joe? Hey Now, What You Doing, Crafty, and Morning, Night, and Day. Those are my favorites from that album. In the same year, in August 2005, they released Depeche Mode, is the they, Playing the Angel. And this is the first time where you have significant writing contributions from Dave Gammon. It's an incredibly strong album. And like New Order, in the 2000s, Depeche Mode was strong in the 2000s. That 01 and 05 double whammy of albums for both of them, I think were very strong. I think that Playing the Angel is even more energetic than Exciter, which was more energetic than Ultra. And some of the songs I like from that are A Pain That I'm Used To, John the Revelator, great energy. Suffer Well, Precious, Nothing's Impossible, and Lillian. Excellent. Sounds of the Universe. So is that this one? Yeah. So for whatever reason, why I didn't get Playing the Angel, who knows, right? Sounds of the Universe is the last CD I bought from either of these bands because, like I say, I stopped buying CDs in 2011. This was 2009. I didn't enjoy this as much as I enjoyed Exciter and Playing the Angel, but I liked how they were still stretching and still trying to find new things, and it still had good energy. Some of the songs I like are Hole to Feed, Fragile Tension, Little Soul, and In Sympathy and Jezebel. I am not going to count, but I will mention Lost Sirens from New Order in 2013, because if you think of Waiting for the Siren's Call in 05, in 2013, this was music that they had created in the 2000s that was not released That's why it's called Lost Sirens. And then they release it. So good that they were putting stuff out. That's fine. But this was yet after 05. It was yet another hiatus. And they lost, Peter Hook and all of that. And I believe Gillian Gilbert left for a while too. So, okay, I would rather have heard new music from them. I actually didn't listen to this one. Maybe I should, and maybe I would be impressed. I don't know. Delta Machine, the same year, March 2013, was the New Order release. And my response to this was, I remember listening to it on streaming and being like, well, I'm glad I didn't spend $17 for that or whatever CDs were at the time. To me, it felt like a typical kind of elder statesman release where it's that I thought 09's album of theirs began that slip into more contemplative production. Oh, we're older now and we're thinking more and we're whatever, introspective. And this is right in the middle of that, this Delta Machine. And just, they have had so much energy, dark in particular, and strong energy throughout their years that it's disappointing when you don't hear more of that on their releases. So it's not one of my favorites, but I do like My Little Universe, Broken, Soft Touch, Raw Nerve, and Soothe My Soul. Which brings me to New Order's final or most recent proper album from 2015 called Music Complete. I liked it. I didn't think it was as strong as the stuff they did in the 2000s, but not bad. It's, to me though, it's almost exclusively electro. There's not a lot of post-punk on there, so it's the same as like with Glitterbug, with the Wombats, where it's great stuff on there, but it's not as interesting to me as the mix of stuff. But things I do like from it: Singularity, People on the High Line, Nothing But a Fool. Is probably my favorite from this album. Listen to Nothing But a Fool if you want to know what Music Complete is about, and Unlearn This Hatred. And they followed that up the following year in 2016 with an album called Complete Music, which was remixes and different versions of songs from Music Complete. Did not listen to it. In 2017, so same clip, you have to respect Depeche Mode for being consistent. They've certainly been the more consistent band of the two. And so in 2017, they released an album called Spirit. The first thing I read about this was critics complaining that they got into politics on this. And here's the thing. Were you not paying attention in the 1980s when they got into politics? Like, I don't understand. Is it because politics is just so divisive now, and was certainly in 2017, that you're like, stay out of the fray? Because screw you. People can sing about what they want, whether you agree with it or not. But also, what's the difference? Like, they've done it before and they decided to do it again. And it's cool that they went to some different place than talking about, all the tough interpersonal issues and love and things like that, which is fine too. But it's nice to mix it up. But this album was more of that slide into kind of slowness, elder statesman feel. I don't fully understand, because I know where they came from and the things they've done, and I just can't figure out why, even on this last album, which I think is an incredibly strong album and better than the previous two, why they can't, like, there are plenty of other older bands, like even freaking Rolling Stones' new album, where their energy is way the hell up to the sky. So I don't know. That said, from Depeche Mode Spirit, I like the songs Scum, You Move, So Much Love, Poor Man, and Fail. Now, even though New Order did not release any new music album-wise after 2015's Music Complete, they did release a single in 2020 called Be a Rebel, which great to have new music from them. Absolutely great. I wouldn't rank it as one of my all-time favorite, New Order songs, but it's nice that it's kind of moving forward in a retro way, if that makes any sense. They're hearkening back to sounds from the 1980s, but in that typical 2020s way. So it's good, good song. And I hope that some, clubs used it in their mixes, because it's certainly worthy. And it's the last new thing we've heard from New Order. I haven't even heard whispers of them recording or releasing any new music, so I have no idea. But what would be really cool is if they figured stuff out with Peter Hook and he came back, because I think that made a big difference in their energy. Then, finally, Memento Mori, 2023, Depeche Mode, has been written up quite a bit because Andy Fletcher died, and this is a response to that in many ways. There was a shoot when I reviewed this for one of the podcasts. I talked about this writing collaborator, forget the name now, from the band whose name I also forget, but that's significant, and look it up and you tell me what I forget. But this is them diving full on into that kind of low beat, downbeat, music that they've been doing in the previous 2 to 3 albums, but they embrace it fully and allow some of that darkness to creep in. This is them being more comfortable with their, whatever you want to call it, elder statesmanness, which is not a necessary thing, but it's where a lot of artists go. I think the production is more interesting and is great. I love the songs Ghosts Again, Don't Say You Love Me, Soul With Me. Caroline's Monkey's a surprising song and does have some energy to it. People Are Good and Always You. And it's a worthy album. It's a worthy album by Depeche Mode, who is now a duo. And I can only hope, and I'm glad they're touring for it or whatever they're doing, but I can only hope that this leads them to eventually more music, as I hope that New Order decides to release new music at a certain point, because you like the bands who have been around for a while, you count on to keep doing what they do. So some conclusions. This is another reason why I put them together in one episode, and that is it's confusing and complicated as to what I like better about each band. I actually like New Order's overall sound better. The way they use electronics, I like their sound better than Depeche Mode. But I think Depeche Mode's arrangements structurally and whatever, and songs are overall stronger than New Order's, and I like the songs better. I enjoy both of their singing. Neither one is my top tier taste for a male vocalist, but Dave Gahan is just hands down a better singer and a more versatile singer, and that's just the way it is. Bernard Sumner, I love you, and your voice is iconic, and it is what it is, and you're doing great things with it, but that voice may rank as the weakest lead singer voice for a mega successful band. And yet, who cares, right? It serves its purpose. But you tell me if maybe you like, and I like it when it works, and it works often. And you may like it too. I think New Order has been a little bit more seminal in terms of their influence on electronic music. A lot of what we hear, especially in the States, I'll say, is much more New Order than it is Depeche Mode. Whereas Depeche Mode, I think, has influenced a lot more kind of individuals, let's say. Like even some of Lil Nas X's stuff, to me, leans much more in a Depeche Mode direction, the newer stuff. And what's his name, Sam Smith, much more Depeche Mode than New Order. So I feel like production-wise and band-wise and trend-wise, New Order takes the day, but when it comes to auteurs and things like that, New Depeche Mode takes the day. And like I said, started from different places, but crossed over. New Order started darker and went lighter. Depeche Mode started lighter and went darker. New Order started more organic and went electronic. Depeche Mode started more electronic and went more organic, but both have had healthy mixes of both. Both have had peaks and valleys. Often, somehow, for some reason, as I have illustrated with the discography at the same time in the same years, like 1993 and 2001 and 2005, like 1983 and 1986. Who knows why? Part of it's zeitgeist, but I think part of it was just coincidence. And overall, I lean more towards Depeche Mode. I think they're closer to my heart in the way they craft things and lyrically and all that stuff than New Order, although, like I said, I've incorporated elements of both of them in my music, in REC's music, which brings me to the featured songs. And like I said, I don't know which order, but I'm going to start with this one because I'm leaning towards this one being first because it's a nice middle song. Polymath from REC's 2020 album, Syzygy for the Weird, also from RECcollection, The Best of REC 2007 to 2020. This is Depeche Mode, late 80s, early 90s, dark wave. That's what all of Syzygy for the Weird is, and there are some covers on there. Look it up. But Polymath is the epitome of that, I think, including the lyrics. in the way the lyrics weave out. My delivery is nothing like Dave Gahan's, but you can hear a lot of the similarities. The hip-hoppy kind of section in the middle, that's all me. That's all REC. That has nothing to do with either band, but that's, like I said with the Wombats, REC is not Depeche Mode and vice versa, but you can hear the influence. The song that's coming up is called All Kinds of Right to Highway 28 song. I've done 2 versions of this song, and one was more of an electro rock song, version. This one is the original version. It's more the techno version or house version. It's from Syzygy, Syzygy for the Weird. Jeez. Syzygy for the Weird from 2020, REC's album. And you can hear the New Order. You can hear, especially in the sonic palette of All Kinds of Right, and the brightness of the lyrics and the general tone and feel. It's very, very New Order. But you can hear a mix. You can hear a little bit of pinches of stuff from Depeche Mode in there, especially in the bridge. But yeah, between the two, tell me if I'm wrong, but I guarantee you listen to this song, which is upcoming in a minute or two, you will hear New Order all over, well more than you heard Depeche Mode midway through the episode on Polymath. So questions for you at the end here. Are you a fan of Depeche Mode or New Order? And if so, do you prefer one? Do you like them equally? Why? I want to know why. Do you remember when you could only be a fan of one of them? When you had to pick? And do you know now that there are still people who debate that pretty vehemently? Can you hear their influence on music of the last 20 years and 30 years even? And if so, where do you hear the influence? And which one do you think was more influential? I want to hear all of the answers to these questions, because as always, my objectives here are music, conversation, and connection. Thank you. And I will talk to you next week. Don't forget the bonus episode, patreon.com/music is not a genre, all about Vince Clarke.
We took turns driving all night long, our favorite songs on loop from Bluetooth on our phone. We had the windows all rolled down and all around. The sound and the air were humming. We've both been out this way before, but this time there was something more. It's what we couldn't believe, it's what we couldn't believe, but it's all kinds of right. It's what we couldn't believe, it's what we never believed, but it's all day and night, and it's all kinds of right. It was our rogue philosophy that we didn't want to see the ways to go, 'cause it's better not to know. We'd sing our songs, hold hands and wait for Highway 28, 'cause we knew it was ours and coming, and all we needed were the earth and sky for those miles that passed on by. To be wild, weird, ours and true. It's what we couldn't believe, city lights. We knew it was our night to find the place where we belong. For Highway 28 had come, and in the air the hum was ours, and weird, and we loved it. We let the city pass us by. Our songs on loop and running high.